Hi, I'm Debra Hamilton. Welcome to my podcast, Why Do Pets Matter? 10 years ago, with my iPhone and a script, I recorded the first episode of the Ultimate Pet Resolution Summit, which chatted with experts about conflicts over animals. Our conversations were intimate, honest, and illustrated how disagreements over animals occur and how those disagreements can reshape people's lives and relationships. In November 2019, I started Why Do Pets Matter, a new podcast that continued these informative discussions. I'm so excited to have you here with me, continuing my exploration into a more meaningful conversation about why pets matter to all of us. My guests and I will share ideas, stories, and experiences straight from the heart, unscripted and holistic. From the bravest moments to the most brokenhearted, we will explore how to resolve disagreements over animals differently. One thing I know for sure is I want to have more meaningful conversations that will help all of us unlock that deeply felt human-animal bond that drives the emotions of conflict. On today's Why Do Pets Matter, we talk to Jeremias of SpOIL Your Dog Essential Oil creator. She is an incredible fountain of information with respect to helping your dogs transition from your home to a new home, from surgery to recovery, from even at the end of life, using essential oils, having your dog live its best life, using essential oils and a holistic method as one of the tools in your toolbox. So now let's hear Jan talk about how she got started, how animals were a big part of her life, how she and I both wanted to be vets, but that didn't happen, and how now her life has come full circle where she's working with people and their pets using essential oils to make sure everyone has their best life, and pets do matter. So let's listen to what she has to say. Hi, Debra Hamilton, and you're listening to the Why Do Pets Matter podcast, and I'm so glad to be here with my friend and colleague, Jeremias. She is with Aroma Lotus Yoga, which she created. Also, the reason she's here on Why Do Pets Matter is because, quite frankly, her SpOIL Your Pet with Essential Oils information that we'll hear more about later. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Why Do Pets Matter, Jan.
Thank you so much, Debra. So glad to be here.
So we always ask our guests one question and go from there. And I always forewarn for everyone who's listening, my guests, what that one question is, which is, why do pets matter to you? So Jan, why do pets matter to you?
Outside of the practical reason is that it's a living for me now. It was far more a passion before it was a living, a way to, stay afloat in these economic times. But I can't remember a time when pets did not matter to me. I think from the earliest point of that I can remember, animals were always a huge part of my life, even when we didn't have anything. I just thought they were beautiful. They had this ability to love unconditionally and just, take us for who we were, even at a very young age. I just think that I was enamored with them, and actually their beauty. I was really obsessed when I was very young with horses, and just the whole, when they ran, it was just like, oh my gosh, this thing is just exquisite.
So tell me a little bit more about your experiences with horses, because I always like to talk about pets other than dogs and cats, because the majority of people have dogs and cats. But if you are experiencing the beauty of horses, tell us how, because I too feel that horses are beautiful, especially the way they're put together, the way they move, and the way they smell.
Yeah, I never really had much. It wasn't like I had a huge amount of exposure to them. I mean, I grew up in Connecticut in farm country, and so a lot of people had horses. So there were quite a few people that had horses, but I also grew up very close to University of Connecticut, which originally was an agricultural school. So they had, farm animals and their own dairy. And so I just think that I had this, awe when I looked at them. And it could have also been I was never afraid of the size. I think I just looked at it as, obviously when you're a kid, even larger than they are when you're an adult, obviously, but it was just this, I think I loved to watch them move. I mean, I rode a little bit, but I wasn't really I can't say I rode, horses.
Yeah, I rode a little bit too. And so believe it or not, in Queens, where I grew up, there was a little Armandale farm that had horses, and they used to hand you the horse and tell you to take it out. by yourself. And of course, I was alive in the 60s when they did things like that. And we would take the horses down to Cunningham Park, ride around, and then come back. After we'd look at our watches and make sure we only kept the horses out an hour. And we were admonished at the time to make sure that we brought them back not sweating. So we had to make sure we didn't race to the barn, which was hard because the horses often wanted to race to the barn. But I have to say, when you said the beauty, that is what really enraptured me with horses. I'm sure that your experiences with them probably included at least watching them move and watching other people, if you didn't ride them, and maybe even, brushing them or doing something like that.
Yeah, feeding sugar cubes or carrots, and petting them when, if they came up to a fence. I think was always in awe of their size, and yet they were quite gentle. I mean, obviously these were horses that were used to being around people. So, but, remember climbing up on the fence, as a kid and, petting them. And that never changed because, a number of years ago, I had a friend who had horses, and we went by. And I think it's kind of like once that impression is made as a kid, there's always this feeling of majesty or majestic quality that they have.
Yeah, it's amazing. So now you don't have any horses, probably never did have any horses, but you have a dog right now.
Yeah, I have had quite a number of pets through my adult life, which, I never even, it was more like, when can I get a pet as an adult, where I was the one that, because when you're growing up, your parents say no, yes, rightfully so. But I was like, okay, now I'm an adult, I can get my own pet, and so I have a dog now who actually runs like a horse. And I think that's probably why I'm so enamored with him. He is part greyhound. And when he runs, he like you see the muscles on a horse, you can see every muscle kind of just defined. It's just remarkable. And he loves to run, which also reminds me of horses, that kind of natural ability to just want to let loose.
Kick up their heels and run.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I always pray that he doesn't go after a deer or something, because I'll probably never get him back. I'm always like, please don't chase anything when you're not, like, if you happen to get off leash, because I know that you would actually come back to me.
Yeah, with enough of a tantalizing thing at the end. Yeah, it's hard for them to turn around and come back.
Right, exactly. So, but he does. He's so gorgeous. And then I've had multiple cats through the years. And I had another dog, which kind of started me on the path of working with animals at all, even though it wasn't a childhood dream, actually. I wanted to be a veterinarian and didn't pursue that route. And so I feel like it's so interesting that here I am now at the end of, not at the end of my life, but sort of in this aspect of my career, and just saying, oh, okay, well, here I am. And I actually got my dream.
Yep. So tell us a little bit more about the dream as a child. So I also wanted to be a veterinarian. Chemistry hated me, so that wasn't ever going to be a dream that could be fulfilled. However, I'm working in the animal field too. So tell us a little bit more about the dream and how it's come to fruition.
So I wanted to be a vet. I remember when I was little, and I remember, I don't know why. I think that multiple people said, why do you want to be a vet, be a doctor, or go into health? And I was like, I don't know, I guess I listened, which, doesn't matter whether I should have or shouldn't have, because here I am. And I actually was going to go to medical school and decided to do research in between, and decided that I didn't really want to be a doctor, that I liked the research. I liked the problem solving and the exploration and the creativity. And so that's really why I decided to concentrate on research, because it was actually exciting. I loved solving problems. And so it was really a nice way to keep my mind going. And so then eventually I had a dog at the time when I was doing research who got quite ill, and I didn't, I was seeing a vet, and I loved my vet, actually. He's a great guy, but it was a little bit, some of the options he was offering me were not, didn't sort of resonate with me. And I wanted some other alternative pathways to kind of explore to see if I could help her. And, I started dabbling and doing things like Reiki and gentle massage and essential oils, and they helped her. And then I had all these people contacting me of like, what can I do with my pet, kind of thing. And so that it kind of evolved on its own, where all of a sudden people were like calling me, or friends were calling me about friends. And I was like, okay, this is what I would suggest. I'm always clear to people, I'm not a veterinarian. I, did study quite a bit of science, anatomy, and biology. And so I really don't understand the body. So I can usually make some fairly good, recommendations that will work well with traditional modalities.
So in your practice of, aroma lotus yoga, you do for people the same kind of things that now you're branching out to help animals in a way that's acknowledging that you're not a veterinarian, but that sometimes aromas and essential oils can make us and our dogs feel so much better. So why do pets matter in your neck of the woods? It would be that there are ways to make our dogs feel secure, especially with the passing of holidays that make them nervous, like the 4th of July. There are different things you can do. So tell me a little bit more about how you do help your clients, both with a little adjustments that are safe and not going to harm the pets, but also with the essential oils that might actually make your pet feel so much better.
It was so interesting with the animals, because I got on the phone the other day with a friend of mine who just got an oil, and she said she put it on her hands and literally her dog like laid down, rolled over, and went on his back for his belly to be rubbed. It was hysterical. So she said, I said, you have to film it for me, but they're so attuned and so sensitive. And so I think using something like essential oils is really helpful on multiple aspects. One is it's that human animal connection. I mean, the aspect of touch, which we all know is helpful in healing. So I think that element, let's say for anxiety, is really calming. And the power, we all know the power of smell. I think we smell something, we can remember exactly where we smelled it. We remember the experience. We remember, whatever it is, cinnamon from holidays, and all of a sudden, and I think our animals' sense of smell, our pets' sense of smell, is so much more profound than ours. So I think we should not overlook that aspect in their healing, just like ours. And so I love that aspect. And yeah, it's kind of funny. I work with both people and pets, but I actually came to the whole path through my animals. So I worked with animals first and then kind of worked on the human aspect. Well, because that's what I did with myself. I used them on her and then I used them on myself. Yep. And being the very clinical, research oriented, very traditional Western medicine oriented, it wasn't something I actually ever thought I'd do, or ever thought I would actually hold like any sort of credibility to. But yet the science is out there now and there's a lot of research around it. So, but I was brought. So I actually work with both, and that relationship and that connection, because I feel like they really truly tell us a lot about who we are as people.
So do people come to you with their animals and stay for themselves, or do they come to you for themselves and bring their animals, or both?
Both. I have people who come to me for their animals and then actually will begin to use them on themselves. And then I have the reverse. Some people never convert over. So it's like they use them on their animals and they never will kind of dabble in that modality for themselves. And that's always kind of an interesting path to me, because I'm also trying to kind of lead them in that direction if they will go.
It's so funny that people apply things to their pets and don't think that if they're helping their pets be less nervous, let's say, that wouldn't necessarily also work for them in stressful situations. It's interesting that you don't visualize that for yourself.
I think it's always very interesting, but I don't think it's different for kids, because I think, I have a friend who used essential oils on her kids for years. And she said all of a sudden it was like, or on one of her kids. And she said, all of a sudden I was like, why am I not using this on the rest of the family? Like, it's like we very much so compartmentalize our lives that sometimes it's very hard to see beyond, that little box.
Expanding your worldview, what else can I apply to make sure that I feel better? And I think during the pandemic and everything else, people were using various different modalities, not just to hopefully avoid getting COVID, but also reducing the stress of being isolated.
No, absolutely. I think that's why millions of people got pets, because of that isolation and that company. I always say that I don't know if I would have survived COVID without my pets, but I do think that people turn to different modalities and different modalities to cope with the situation of isolation and fear and all the other things that, came up over the past few years. The trauma, which I think it was very traumatic for the majority of people.
And I think our pets absolutely felt that trauma through us. So even if they were not traumatized because we were home, and although they didn't get as much sleep as they used to get because we're home, I saw so many cartoons that said the dogs and cats, especially the cats, said, "Get the heck out." The trauma they might have gone through was that we were always there, but we were going through trauma. And I'm sure in your work, seeing how the dogs react to you and maybe give you an idea of what you need to do, as well as what you need to do for them.
Absolutely. I always say our pets are just a mirror of us. And my animals have always shown me completely who I am and what I'm doing, to the extent where, I'll sit there and I'll be like, okay, I'm trying. Like, I'll be anxious. I'll be like, okay, I'm trying to control it, like doing the best I can here. But I think that absolutely. I think that our animals are really just an extension. I had a friend who was a dog behaviorist, and he used to always say the leash is just an external umbilical cord. And I loved that phrase, because I feel like they really are extensions of us, and they really do everything we go through. They really go through.
Yeah, they really are. They do go through everything we go through. And as you have clients and you look at them with their pets, what are some of the things you're finding pets experiencing now that you hadn't seen before? I'm thinking that there's probably some anxiety because you're leaving. It was interesting that most people said, well, you got a new dog and now you're going to leave him, and he excuse me, and he's never been alone before, and he might destroy the house. And I'm thinking, my older dogs would be like, wait a minute, you were here and now you're gone, and they might get a little anxious.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'm seeing now is I've had probably, I want to say, a number of calls over the past week and a half with animals that are aggressive to, showing aggressive behavior. And I just
shown before.
That they hadn't shown before. And I think that, this whole idea of having somebody home, and, Tonka has a job when I'm here, he has a job, and that job is to protect me and protect the house. And, he's very well trained, but I think for an animal that's not well trained and hasn't really been properly socialized and isn't used to strangers, all of a sudden somebody coming into my space or into my home with my humans, so I think that that's what I'm seeing a lot. And I'm not a dog behaviorist, and I'm always very clear, people seeking professional help in situations like that, because I think there's a lot of things that can happen that we don't want to happen. But I really feel like that, there are, in conjunction with good dog behavior or animal behaviorists, there is, alternative ways of trying to relieve anxiety and stress, and, and introducing other people into that process so that it's not only you.
It's so interesting you said that, because I had a dog who during the pandemic became very protective of me. And I realized the reason she became really protective of me was because every time we walked past someone during COVID, I would pull her leash close so that we wouldn't be near them, because we had to stay 6 feet away. So she picked up, as you said, the leash is an extension of you. She picked up that something made me nervous about when people walk by. And so now you really can't let her visit with people because she puts on her best act of aggression that she ever, and she was 8 or 9 when this happened. She wasn't a young puppy. She was 8 or 9 and happy as a clam and greeted everyone for 8 years, happily, tail wagging. And then the 18 months of COVID where we were walking and steering clear of everyone made her very apprehensive. So what you said was so impactful to me because it did happen to me. It happened to me with a dog who I'd lived with for 8 years and never had an issue like that in a million years. She also started to dislike white dogs, which was really not nice. So that was bad. However, the interesting piece is that I'm sure we take care of her behavior. We're very aware of it. However, I'm sure there's some essential oil that we might have worked with that we didn't, that could have at least made her a little calmer, in that it would make it, because I know when I use essential oils, so I only can talk for mine because I've never used them on my dogs, but that's why you're here on Why Do Pets Matter, because I want people to know you're out there and that essential oils are available to people for their pets to calm them down. And some people might be way smarter than me. I know they have them for cats. They have some essential oil that they sell if you're moving a cat from point A to point B and you want them to move quietly. But for, Roxy, the apprehension she feels when you're walking her on a leash is something that if we, put a drop on her nose before she left or whatever, maybe on her leash so that it would be around her neck, whatever it is, she would be a little less on guard, so to speak.
Well, it's interesting that you were talking about walking because about a year ago I moved and Tonka is a dog's dog, loves other dogs. And when I first moved in and I was walking my neighborhood, on leash, he got pretty aggressive with a few other dogs. And the only thing I could think of is that, here's a dog that loves other dogs it was the anxiety of the move and the fact that he was in a new location. We had a temporary place we lived for it was supposed to be like a month, but with COVID turned out to be 6 months. So we had a lot of transition and then he got here. And that just to show that they also change with age, because all of a sudden he's much more of a people dog than he used to be.
Yeah.
He used to be very happy with dogs and could care less about people. There were like 4 humans he really loved. And now it's like
everyone is his friend. He hasn't met anyone who isn't his friend. Right.
That's right. He wants everybody to pet him, and so I'm like, boy, this is a change, and he was, he's 10. So I moved when he was 9. So,
it's amazing the different phases they go through because they do sometimes change. I think so. I had the same experience you did, which was, Roxy had moved out of her house of 8 years to another house. So that was a shift for her. We were in COVID where I was making sure she was close to me. So that was a shift and I never walked them at my house. I would walk in the backyard because we had like 2 acres. So we just walk in the backyard. So she never went on walks. Now she's going on walks. And as she's going on walks where she would gleefully go on walks at a dog show, I would pull her close and that would be something that was foreign to her and that shifts it. So you had the same experience. You moved and then there was COVID and everybody stayed longer than ever wherever they were because of COVID. And the dogs definitely pick up on that experience and they become different and educate us on why they're different and how they're different. And we really need to shift the way we take care of them.
I think it's lately, especially dealing with all, my own pets and talking to so many people that you realize that dogs act the way they do for a reason, or pets act the way they do for a reason. Like if a dog's aggressive, there's a reason why it's aggressive, and I think that people forget that. It's like they look at, oh my gosh, my pet is misbehaving. Oh gosh, what can I do? But to look at yourself and to look at the circumstance, which also is challenging sometimes because we're not
going through it too.
That's right. And when I'm talking to people, I'm getting it secondhand. So I didn't see the situation, which is also sometimes hard because it's their description of what happened. And I'd love to see what the dog's reaction was, like what the almost conversation was, like body language and everything, because it's all valuable. And it's all valuable and really important to what ended up happening, what, transpired in the circumstance.
It's interesting that you've come full circle from wanting to work with dogs, doing something else, and then coming back to working with people and their dogs, which is what I do, but in a totally different way. But yet you create a peaceful environment for the people and the dogs to live in as well. Tell me a little bit more about the things you've seen happen with the use of essential oils.
I work a lot with people with older dogs. That just seems to be the people who come to me for whatever reason. Sometimes it's, veterinary expense and the fact that they can't afford traditional modalities. And they're like, okay, well, I don't want my animal to suffer. And I want to do, I want to do well by them. And I love them, but I really can't do what they're asking me to do. Or it's just like, okay, when my cat got sick and had to have surgery, or they thought about doing surgery. I mean, he was 18. I wasn't doing surgery on an 18-year-old cat, but I also didn't want him to suffer. So a lot of it is just that peace you can bring to people and that empowerment that people can receive for just being able to do something for their animals. Because I think what happens is we end up feeling very helpless. Yeah. It's like, it's horrible to watch something that you love deteriorate and suffer, and then to sit there and think, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. And then that you're doing something that's going to give them the best quality of life, which is really what we all want. And so that's
right. And the ease and peace to transition.
That's right. And I think there is that also, obviously, because I think that sometimes I work with people who aren't ready for whatever reason. Really, maybe the animal should be put to sleep. It's old, it's sick, but we all have our own reasons why. My first dog, I think that maybe I should have, but I just couldn't bear to be without her. And so I think we all make those choices, but I think that also allows people to have that time, that really quality time with their animal.
And the animal is in a comfort zone, and that's what they're looking for, the animal to be in a comfort zone. It's not like you're giving it medication, but you're giving it some ability to feel good while everyone's wrapping their head around either losing them or it's recovering from surgery or whatever, so that you can bring it to a place where it's calm. Because a lot of times when dogs get out of surgery that they're going to recover from, that transition sometimes is very difficult. I always say, you can't tell them, well, I did this surgery because you had stones in your kidney and we had it, or you had a rock in your belly because you ate it, or whatever it is. And essential oils can often give them that sense of calm while they're recuperating. So, not necessarily always have the cone around their head or whatever, if you're in the room, kind of thing.
Right. I mean, the other thing is, I have people who call because, let's say, like you said, surgery, and some of those surgeries, could be things like orthopedic surgeries, which I sometimes find the most challenging, because usually you're taking, or a lot of times you have a very active dog that all of a sudden,
Yeah, cruciate surgery. The surgery is the easy part.
That's right. It's the keeping the dog crated or from not jumping or whatever. And, if we think about that, I think it's, I know when I've gotten injured, it's very anxiety causing, especially if you're used to moving. You're kind of like, it expends energy and anxiety. So if you look at an animal that's anxious anyway, a dog, and then all of a sudden they do have surgery where they can't expend that energy of that anxious energy, like by going for a walk or a run, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, this animal is like beside itself for, it's because it can't move like it wants to. And mom and dad are trying to control me and not let me move. And
you feel mean as mom and dad. And it is the most delicate dance. And to be able to give them peace, I always say to people, the surgery is the easy part, and the first 24 hours post-surgery are usually really easy too, because they're still anesthetized to a great.
That's right.
It's 48 hours after, when first of all, they're a little frightened what the heck went on. And then they're looking to you for answers, and you're putting them in a crate and they're like, what's this about? I'm never in a crate. You are taking them for a 6-foot leash walk instead of a flexi walk, or letting them run around the backyard. What's that all about? And you really do need to have a way to communicate. And sometimes the best way to communicate is to take the edge off, and the edge off, not necessarily just being painkillers where they might go to sleep a lot of times, because the painkillers are good and that they're prescribed by the vet and you give them to them. But often you can augment that by just having them in a situation like the cats to a new environment, where that atomizer, or the little drop on their nose or whatever, which will make them feel more calm at the time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's those transitionary times sometimes, because I get the same comment from people who who rescue an animal, and when they first get them home, animals are not truly behaving the way that's their natural behavior. They're frightened and and all these
They
things.
blossom once they get there, for better or for worse.
That's right. And then all of a sudden they relax, and all of a sudden you get an animal that's like, oh my gosh, this is a totally different dog or cat than I brought home after a month, because it's now, okay, well, now I know I'm staying.
It's funny you said that, because I always say to people who take a puppy home or who take a dog from rescue, the first week or two, you're right, they're nervous. They don't know. If they're smart, because they've been through rescue a few times, they are on their best behavior. They remember what got them punished and what didn't, because they're really smart. Puppies, don't get into mischief as much, because you're very diligent the first week or two, and they aren't as curious the first week or two. And then all of a sudden, curiosity kicks in, and your shoes get chewed, and the sheetrock gets chewed, and everything else gets chewed, and they run away. When they used to come all the time, they run away. And the older dogs slip and say, well, they like me. And I always say, they always do that once they know they've got you. Most of the time you'll stay and they'll live through it. But really, if you can give them something that is, medicinal, but not medicinal, meaning that the essential oils will give them the opportunity to take a little bit of a chill, that might be a thought, because that way the dog's transition from rescue to house is assisted, as well as once in the house, from well-behaved dog because I want to stay, to, oh, I'm a free-for-all now. So I just had someone who adopted a dog and only had 48 hours to evaluate it. I wish I'd put her in touch with you, because the dog nipped her father and nipped her husband. And otherwise it was a great dog. It fetched, it, came what was called, it walked well on a leash. And I said, 48 hours does not an evaluation really make. However, nipping is something that people will really return a dog to a rescue for. However, if we were able to figure out how to take that edge off using some essential oils, may or may not work, right? But could, and work with an animal behaviorist to understand why the nipping happened, that dog could have had a phenomenal home. So I'm so glad that we have had you, because you've given so much eye-opening information, because essential oils really are that beauty that you were talking about, and that dream that you were talking about at the beginning. But it will help us live a more deeply understanding life with our pets during their transitions, during our transitions with them, and they don't understand, so it'll help us with that, during surgical things that will keep the edge off. And then, of course, if you're bringing a new dog home that has a whole different history, either as a puppy or as an older dog, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that, getting involved and checking it out with someone who deals with essential oils that can help might be the first great step before you start medicating them to be quiet. I know that that's a big thing in veterinary medicine now, but this might be the best first step with an animal behaviorist, and then work with your veterinarian if you can't get past whatever behavior is really stressing the dogs out.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I always say that there's no substitute. So there are some basics, good nutrition, exercise. I mean, I always say you can't expect a dog to behave if they're an active dog and you haven't done anything with them, I mean,
you can't come home and say, I'm walking around the block, and then sit quietly in the corner.
That's right. And so I always say that. And I think there are a few other transitions which people can think about. I mean, I think traveling is hugely a transition point for people, and everybody's taking vacations, whether you take your pet with you or you don't take your pet with you, that transition. So they're going to be staying with someone else, they're going to be kenneled or whatever. It's always a good idea to see if you have essential oils or if you can get essential oils, and the person who's caring for them will apply them. It might make that transition easier. If you're taking them with you, as we were talking about, the whole moving aspect and the fact that their routine is changed, and all of a sudden, we're staying in a hotel or on a campsite or wherever, and now all of a sudden we're asking them to not be affected by that. It's like, okay, well, you just be the same and we're just going to move locations.
Right. And that absolutely doesn't work. Jan, this has been so educational for me, and I know it's been educational for all of my listeners. I love the fact that we talked about so many things, but at the end here, we're talking about this transition, and there's so many times when, if they get in touch with you, they can work through these transitions in a holistic way, which is great. How do they get in touch with you, Jan, at the end, so that they can, I'm going to put it in the end notes too, as well, everyone, but how would they get in touch with you if they want to talk more about this?
The best way is either, if people are on LinkedIn, to go through LinkedIn. That's always a really great way, and I'm on that a lot. And then Facebook is really good if you're a social media person. Those are usually the best ways to reach me. I would say email, but I have to be honest to our listeners, email is not my best mode of communication these days. I get too much junk mail, and then I weed through and I lose all the important stuff. And to me, this is really important. So get me where you can get me.
That's right, on Messenger. So it would be Jan Jeremias, and it wouldn't be SpOIL, your dog with essential oils. It would be Jan Jeremias.
Yeah, Jan Jeremias is the best.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, until next time, everyone, I hope this has been one of our best, I think so, podcasts. Let me know in the notes and in the comments. And until next time, kiss your dogs for me. This is Debra Hamilton, and you've been listening to the Why Do Pets Matter podcast. The Why Do Pets Matter podcast drops every Thursday and can be found on whichever platform you find your podcast. Subscribe now, invite your friends, and I cannot wait to have you join me in these conversations.